Hey folks, this is another video in a series that aspires to teach Google Apps Script fundamentals to beginners. In previous videos, we've explored how to use our console log, how to organize our files directory, how to use the plus symbol to concatenate strings, as well as to run math operations. We've explored dates and times, as well as arrays and two-dimensional arrays. We're going to resume by navigating to the Files module, where we will be creating a new script file. Our focus will be for loops, so we are going to be titling this e_for_loops. We're going to hit enter, and we'll change the name of our function to be called loop E explore. We're going to save our project. We're going to select line 2. We're going to hit enter once. We're going to add 2 slashes for a comment where we will be declaring one-dimensional array. We're going to hit enter and tab, and now we're going to be declaring a variable of array, which will be set equal to a square bracket. We're going to be having 2 elements in this array, both of which are going to be strings. So that means we need to have quotation marks. I've been using single quotes, so that's what I'll be using. So my first element is going to be hello, and then I'm going to add a comma, and then I'm going to add another set of quotes where I'm going to add my second element of world. I'm going to hit the right arrow on my keyboard twice. I'm going to add a semicolon. I'm going to hit enter twice, and then I'm going to add 2 slashes for a comment where I'll be adding some logging. I'm going to hit enter and tab. I'll use logger.log to have an open parentheses where I will add another set of single quotes so that I can add a message to this log. I'm going to say the length of the array is, I'm going to add a semicolon, hit space, hit the right arrow on your keyboard, hit space, add a plus symbol, hit space, and then use array.length. We hit the right arrow on our keyboard and we'll add a semicolon. We will run our function, and now you can see that our output is the length of the array is 2. Now, an important note about this is that arrays are structured with a 0 index, which means that the first value is represented by 0, the second value is represented by 1, the third value, if there is one, will be represented by 2, and so on. So when we get the length of the array is 2, it is counting the elements. But that array length will have to be modified if we want to use it in reference to our array. We're going to resume on line 7, where we will hit enter 2 times, and then we're going to hit the left arrow on our keyboard 4 times. We're going to add 2 slashes for a comment, and we will now be exploring a standard 0 index for loop. We're going to hit enter and tab. So for loops are naturally 0 indexed like arrays. And it's very common that when you use a for loop, you will be leveraging either a one-dimensional array, which is what we have on line 4, or a two-dimensional array. Later in this lesson, we're going to be exploring how to loop through two-dimensional arrays, but for the time being, we're going to focus on a standard 0 index for loop using an array. So we will begin by typing out the word for. We're going to have open parentheses, and we are going to need to declare a variable that will be iterated. It is very common if you explore documentation or tutorials or forum posts to see that the for loop that people are referencing has a variable of I, which stands for iterable or iteration. The next thing that you need to use is in. So you are declaring a variable in some type of structure. In this case, we will be using our one-dimensional array. So we will type out the variable name that we want to loop through. That gives us for open parentheses, I in array, closing parentheses. We're going to hit the right arrow on our keyboard. We'll hit space, add curly brackets, and hit enter. We're going to add 2 slashes for a comment. so that we can log out the value of I. We're going to hit enter and tab. We're going to use logger.log, open parentheses, and then we're going to pass in our variable I. We're going to hit the right arrow on our keyboard and we're going to add a semicolon. We're going to hit save and then we will run our project. The first value on our console log is coming from line 7, where we are measuring the length of the array. That is telling us that the length of the array is 2. So that means we have 2 elements within our one-dimensional array. On line 12, we are logging out the value of I within our for loop. So the way that a for loop works is you start at a specific value. And if you do not declare the value of your variable, then it will start at 0. Each time the loop runs, it will add 1 or subtract 1 from the value of I. In this case, we have not declared how much I is worth, so it defaults to I. Additionally, we have not declared whether we want to increment positively or negatively, so it defaults to positive incrementation. So what we're seeing is the first log here is a value of 0, and that's because we are using logger.log I. So the first loop returns 0 because the for loop is 0 indexed. The next time it runs for the second element of the thing that we're looping through, in this case our array, we are returning the number 1. And that's because we have positively incremented on top of the value of 0 by adding 1 to it, which gives us 1. Because our array only has 2 elements in it, our loop only runs for 2 times because we are in array, for I in array. So we have the value of 0 that will be incremented for the number of elements within the thing that we are looping through, in this case, our one-dimensional array with 2 elements. We're going to go back to line 4, and we're going to click to the right of our second element, which is a string that has the value of world. We're going to add a comma, we're going to add single quotes, and we're going to type the word yay. So now our array has 3 elements. When we hit run, you'll see that those changes have been reflected to our log on line 7 as well as our log on line 12. The length of the array is now 3, and we have 3 results from our for loop, each result being incremented by 1 starting at 0. What we're going to do now is show or demonstrate why you would do this and how you would use this. So we're going to resume on line 12. We're going to hit enter twice. We're going to hit the left arrow on our keyboard twice, and we're going to add 2 slashes for a comment, where now we will log out each element of our array. We're going to hit enter and tab. We're going to do logger.log, open parentheses, and then we're going to reference our array variable, and we're going to add a square bracket. So in our arrays lesson, we hard-coded each element of our array that we wanted to extract. So if we wanted to extract hello, then we would do array square bracket 0. If we wanted to extract world, we would do array square bracket 1, and so on. The value of a loop is that it will do that for you without you having to write out all those lines. So we can pass in our iterator variable, and we can say array square bracket I. This way, when we run our for loop, you'll see that we are accessing each element of the array. So we have logging on line 12 that is showing us the element or the value of our variable I, but we can also use that value in order to access our array elements, which is what's happening on line 15. So I'm going to comment out line 12, so we no longer need to see the value of I. And if we hit run, you can see that we are getting that output from line 7 that says the array length is 3. and then we're accessing each element of the array because we are using logger.log array square bracket I. This is the most common implementation of a for loop, and it is something that you are going to use probably in all of your projects if you continue forward with scripting in AppScript. So I'm going to comment out line 15 because I don't need it anymore. You can either manually type 2 slashes in front of the line, or you can use a keyboard shortcut. I'm on a Mac, so I did Command/. If you're on Windows, it's probably Control/. We're going to hit the down arrow once, so we're on line 16. We're going to hit Enter twice. We're going to hit the left arrow on our keyboard twice, and now we are going to explore defining our variable I. We are going to hit Enter once and hit Tab, and we're going to do 4 open parentheses. So as I said, you can define I. And if you are looking at documentation or forum posts or whatever, you'll probably see a version of for loops similar to this, where individuals will have 3 declarations that are separated by semicolons. The first declaration is declaring a variable. In this case, we would use the character var of I. So you'll say var I, and then you'll set it equal to something. So we can set I as being equal to 0 if we want to, or we can set it equal to 1 or whatever. So we're just going to say var I is equal to 0, and then you add in semicolon. The second argument is defining how long you want your loop to run. So you can say I is less than or equal to array. So we can then add a semicolon. And then the third declaration is the way that you want to increment. So if you want to increment positively, you can do I++. And you hit the right arrow on your keyboard, hit space, add curly brackets, hit Enter, add 2 slashes for comment, and now we're going to log out the value of I. I'm going to hit Enter and Tab, and we're going to do logger.log, open parentheses, and then we're going to pass in I. We're going to hit the right arrow, and we're going to add a semicolon. Now, I don't typically do this. My preference is just to do for I in array. I just think it's cleaner, and I typically am working with an array or a 2-dimensional array, so I want my variable I to start at 0, so I don't need to declare it. I think this is just kind of a long-winded way of getting to the root of what I want to do. Now, because I don't use this version that frequently, I apologize if this doesn't run because I'm not sure if I can just say I is less than or equal to array. I might need to say array.length. So apologies if we get an error here. So we're going to hit run, and you can see that we didn't get any output here. And the reason for that is because I can't just say array the same way that I did up here. I'm going to do array.length. Now, if we do array.length, this less than or equal to is not going to work because array.length is giving us 3, and we only have 3 elements, which is in a 0 index versus array.length, which is an index of 1. So instead of saying less than or equal to, we're just going to say less than array.length. And now when we hit run, you'll see that we are getting 0, 1, and 2, the same way that we got 0, 1, and 2 with for I in array. So in addition to positive incrementation, you can also do, you can take away, so you can go descending. So this is a little bit more complicated, so I apologize if this kind of, is a bit of a tongue twister or a mind melder, but I just want you to be aware of it. So in this case, we could start at the last element in our array and go backwards. So what I'm going to do real quick is go to line 21. I'm going to hit Enter twice, hit the back arrow, or sorry, the left arrow on your keyboard twice, 2 slashes for comment, and now we're going to log out the value of the array element. We're going to hit Enter and Tab, and we'll do logger.log open parentheses, and we'll say array square bracket I. So when we declare our variable to be 0, and then we have it run for as long as I is less than array.length, which in this case is 3, that means that our starting point is 0 and our end point is 2, and we increment positively. We're getting the same thing as for I in array when we use array square bracket I. But in the event that you wanted to go backwards, right? So get the last element of your array and then go, instead of 0, 1, 2, to go 2, 1, 0, you can modify this version of a for loop. So you can declare I to be equal to array.length. Now, when you say array.length, that's returning the number 3. So you'll need to normalize it for a 0 index by subtracting 1. You'll add semicolons and hit space, and then you'll say where I is greater than or equal to 0. And then instead of doing I++, you'll do I minus minus. And now when you hit save and run, you'll see that we are still getting the array length is 3. And then down here, when we reference array length and remove 1, that gives us 2. So the first output in our console is element 2, which is yay. Then we remove 1 from it because we are incrementing in a descending value, or we are removing 1 from the value of I. 2 minus 1 is 1, and thus we are getting our second element, which is world. And then after the loop finishes, we remove 1 from 1 and we get 0, which gives us our first element in a 0 indexed array, which is hello. Then, because we established that the value of I has to be greater than or equal to 0, the loop ends and our function completes. So I do not use this version of a for loop, but it is very common that you will see this structure out there. So I want you to know that it exists. My preference is the standard 0 index array. So I'll just say for I in whatever I want to loop through, and then I use the value of I the same way that we are in this version of the for loop where we are defining our value of I. Cool, so I'm going to comment out lines 24 through 20 because we don't need them anymore. And then I am going to click on line 25. I'm going to hit enter twice. I'm going to hit the left arrow on my keyboard twice. I'm going to add 2 slashes for a comment where we will learn how to loop through a 2-dimensional array. I'm going to hit enter and tab. So we don't need our standard 0 index loop. So because of the way that I set up my comment and my indentation, I have this little collapsible arrow here. So I'm going to collapse line 9, and then the same thing exists on line 18. So I'm going to collapse that, and now we have a nice clean script where we can work. So we are going to begin by declaring a 2-dimensional array. So we're going to say var array 2d, and we're going to set that equal to square bracket, and then we're going to hit enter. And then we are going to do single quote, or sorry, so one set of square brackets, and we'll have 2 strings. So we'll do hey, comma, second string will be galaxy. We'll hit the right arrow on our keyboard. We'll add a comma after our square brackets, and we'll hit enter, and we'll enter another set of square brackets, and we'll say hi, comma, universe. So these are strings, which means they all need to be wrapped by single quotes or double quotes, whatever you've been using, and they need to be comma separated. Cool, so now we have a 2-dimensional array, which means that we have 2 dimensions to work with. The first is the array that we want to access. So in this case, we have 2 arrays in our 2-dimensional arrays, and each array has 2 elements. So we're going to select line 31. We're going to hit enter twice, hit the left arrow on our keyboard twice, 2 slashes for a comment, and we will loop through the first dimension. We're going to hit enter and tab, and we're going to declare for with an open parentheses I in array 2d. We're going to hit the right arrow on our keyboard. We're going to hit space. We're going to have curly brackets. We're going to hit enter once, and we're going to log out the value of I. So we're going to hit enter and tab, capital L, logger. Sorry about that. Logger.log, open parentheses, single quotes. The value of I is colon, space, go outside of your single quotes, hit space, plus sign, space, I. Hit the right arrow on your keyboard, hit space, open curly brackets. Sorry, we don't need curly brackets. I don't know why I did that. Okay, we're going to add a semicolon. That's what I meant to say. So we're going to run our code now. And, okay, you know what? I'm going to change up some things here because this worked. But we got the value of I is 0, the value of I is 1, and then we have the length of the array is 3. We don't want to measure that array anymore. So we are going to copy lines 6 and 7, and then we're going to comment it out because we don't need it, and we can close line 3 because we don't need that one-dimensional array anymore. We're going to go to line 31. We're going to hit enter twice, and we are going to paste in the value of line 6. And then instead of doing array.length, we're going to do array to d.length. We'll run our code. And now you can see that we are measuring the length of our two-dimensional array. So we are going to be getting the first dimension of our two-dimensional array. So let's change that language a little bit from the length of the array is to the length of the first dimension is. This way we just kind of see what's going on, so that when we run this, we can see that our first dimension is 2, and the value of I is 0 and 1. Cool, so we are going to resume on line 39, and we're going to hit enter once, twice, 2 slashes for a comment, and we will log out the first dimension. We'll hit enter and tab, and we'll do logger.log, open parentheses. We'll do array 2d square bracket I. We'll run our code. And now you can see that we're getting some output here that shows us that the length of the first dimension is 2, and the value of I is 0. And when the value of I is 0, and we use it with our array 2D with square brackets, we are getting an array. So the first step of logging through a two-dimensional array is accessing the first dimension, which is all of the arrays in the two-dimensional array. The next thing that we're going to want to do is access each element of the array. So we're going to resume on line 42. We're going to hit enter twice. We're going to add 2 slashes for a comment, and now we will loop through the second dimension. We're going to hit enter and tab, and we'll use 4 open parentheses j in array 2d square bracket I. We'll hit the right arrow on our keyboard twice, hit space, add curly brackets, hit enter once, add 2 slashes for a comment, and we will log out the value of j. We're going to hit enter and tab, and we'll do logger.log, open parentheses j. And you know what we'll actually do? My apologies. We'll hit the left arrow on your keyboard so it says logger.log, open parentheses, and you are to the left of j. We're going to add in single quotes, and we'll say the element number is colon space, single quote space, plus symbol space. We're going to add a semicolon to the right of our parentheses. We're going to hit save, and then we're going to hit run, and then I'll explain some stuff. So you will typically see when you nest a for loop within another for loop, which is what we've done here, that the second iteration variable value will be j. And I don't totally know why that is, but my assumption is that j comes after I. So when you declare variable I, you want to have some type of logical indication that those two variables are related to one another in some way, because you can't use the variable I again because you want it to maintain clean iteration so that it either increments positively or negatively in the right sequence. So typically you will see J as the nested loop value if you are looping within a loop, which is what you have to do when you're working with a two-dimensional array. So now we're going to result our console log here in an attempt to make it more transparent what happened here. So the first thing that we're doing is we are measuring the length of the first dimension of our two-dimensional array. So we have two arrays within our two-dimensional array, which means that our first dimension is represented by the number 2 for the two arrays that we are working with. When we loop through our two-dimensional array, we are accessing the first dimension using the iterable variable of I. So the value of I starts at 0, and when we pass our variable I to our two-dimensional array within the for loop, we return our first array, which is hey, galaxy. Those are the two elements in the array. Next, we get to our nested for loop, where we are declaring a variable j, which will also increment positively with a starting index of 0. And instead of just looping through our array2d variable, we are looping through our array2d variable using the variable I in order to access our first dimension. So because this second for loop is nested within a for loop, when we declare array2d with a square bracket and the variable of I, the value of I will be passed into this second loop. So that is the same as us saying for j in and then square bracket hey, comma, galaxy. So when we return the variable j, it will also have a starting index of 0. And that's why when we have this logger.log here that says the element number is, and then we're referencing variable j, you'll see that we are getting output of 0 and 1. And that's because our array has two elements within it, hey and galaxy. And those are being measured out when we iterate through j. Once our nested for loop finishes looping through the value of array2d square bracket I, the for loop with the value of I runs again. So it adds 1 to the value of I, which when passed to array2d square bracket I, returns hi and universe. And because there are two elements in that loop, we get 0 and 1. And because our array only has two arrays in it, or our two-dimensional array only has two arrays in it, our loop concludes without error. So what we can do now is go to line 47. We can hit enter twice, left arrow twice, and we can log out the value of each element in the array. We'll hit enter and tab, and we'll do logger.log, open parentheses, and then we'll use array2d square bracket I square bracket j. And when we hit run, you'll see that we are getting two dimensions. The first dimension is an array. The first element in that array is hey. The second element is galaxy. The loop has completed, both the for I loop and the for j loop, and then it is adding 1 to the value of I, which then returns the second array in our two-dimensional array, which is hi and universe. We then enter our nested for loop where there is a variable of j, and we begin, at element number 1, which is hi, and then element number 2, which is universe. Now, this can be a complicated topic because of all of the moving parts. Understanding how arrays and two-dimensional arrays work is a tremendous step forward in your development and understanding of programming. Once you understand how to use for loops in order to loop through arrays and two-dimensional arrays, you will allow yourself the ability to process and transform larger amounts of data, which will then set up your ability to develop applications that have functional use cases in scripting.
I hope you found this video helpful. If you'd like to continue following this series, there's a playlist linked in the description.